who's joining us for this really interesting webinar on how to reopen your business after the pandemic. We've got an amazing panel who I'll let introduce themselves in a couple of minutes. But first of all, I just wanted to introduce myself and Tide. My name's Kieran Hawker. I'm the event manager here at Tide. I know we've got a good number of our members on the webinar, but also a good number of people who are new to Tide. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick rundown of who we are and what we do. We are a business current account designed for SMEs, freelancers, and startups to save you guys money with your time and money with your business banking needs. We currently have around 190,000 customers in the UK, and we're the fastest growing business current account in the UK as well, which is no small feat, let me tell you. We're great for startups and small businesses and freelancers. Like I said, there's no monthly or annual fees, no minimum deposit, and no credit checks when you open an account with us too. So this means you can even try us for free against as you're running your current business account as well. So you can do a direct comparison on cost, ease of use, and all that kind of stuff. Usually takes between 5 or 10 minutes for you to sign up to get an account number and sort code. When I signed up for my card when I joined Tide, it only took 4 minutes and 37 seconds from start to finish, and I had my sort code and account number at the end of that, which was really good, and then I received my bank card I think 4 or 5 days later. The app itself is packed full of really interesting features. You can do auto categorization of your spending, so you can see exactly where your money's going and when it went there. We've recently released a brand new invoicing feature as well. It's free, and you can manage all your invoices in one place. We listened to our members about what they wanted with the invoicing app, and we put in some really interesting features. So you can have professional invoice templates, including your own logo, create invoices really quickly and easily as well, and edit the email that sends the invoice to your customer. We've also recently teamed up with Akodo to provide invoice protection. So that allows you to insure against invoices, invoice non-payment, which is a really nice feature as well. You also don't need to share one single bank card for the account. So if you want to have cards for your co-directors, your senior leadership, members of staff and employees to be able to make company expenses, that's possible. And you can have up to 30 cards on the one account. And also, finally, last point, you can also have split the account into 4 subcategories, which is really useful. So if you want to have a category for your tax, for your event spend, for your marketing, that is totally possible within the app too. I will also talk later about how any of non-members out there can easily join us and become a Tide member, and I'll tell you exactly how to do that later on in the presentation. But for now, I'm going to ask the panel to give themselves a quick introduction, and we shall move on to Fiona to give herself a quick introduction, please.
Thank you. So my name's Fiona Pollard. I'm a director of a company called Heritage Events, which puts on events around the country. Things like classical concerts and food and drink festivals. I'm also a board member of Visit England, which is the government's organisation that's responsible for tourism. So we have been particularly active over the past 3 months of the pandemic, trying to do all sorts of things for our members to ensure that tourism is at the forefront of everything in terms of the return to work.
Great, thank you, Fiona. And Kathryn?
Hello, apologies if you hear any background noise. I can't hear it, but apparently others can. My name is Kathryn Davis. I'm the head of tourism at Destination Bristol, which is a destination management organisation working within the visitor economy for Bristol and South Gloucestershire. I've also been the interim CEO of Visit Bath since September last year, and have about 20 years experience working in destination management marketing within the tourism, hospitality, meetings and events sector.
Great, thank you, Fiona. Just for our attendees as well, we will be doing a Q&A at the end, so do please get your questions into the Q&A section within the Zoom platform, and we'll get to those later on. So we'll move on now. Just wanted to talk, we're lucky to obviously to have Fiona and Kathryn, but Fiona is actually a Tide member. And before we get on to the main bit of the presentation, it'd just be interesting to find out, Fiona, what you think of Tide, how you found it useful for your businesses.
Yeah, well, I joined Tide about a year ago, I suppose. And the main attraction for me was that I sit across different boards and I have different businesses. So I find it very easy to use to separately catalogue all of my business expenses. The ability to actually define what you're spending money on and for that to fall into a separate bucket is very useful. It's extremely cost effective. It's a very cheap way of banking. I think app-based banking is becoming increasingly important. I mean, the pandemic has brought that into focus with contactless and everything associated with it. The ability to have everything in a format that I can upload to my accountant saves me money. Those inputs don't have to be done again. And then I think it's really important in the SME sector to have all of your support services truly understanding what SME is about. And I think this webinar is an example of how Tide is doing that. So that's my plug for why I'm a Tide member.
Great, thanks, Fiona. And I just wanted to run a couple of polls for the attendees so we can have a bit more of understanding who we're speaking to. So poll 1, if you guys wouldn't mind taking part in this, just so we can see the sort of size of the companies that people are working in and working from. I'll give people a few more seconds to get there. So we're at 50% anymore, 55%, 60, we're moving up. This will just allow us to understand who we're talking to this morning. Any more for any more? I'll end the poll now, and we have a 72% response. Oh, and share the results. So yeah, as you can see there, the majority of people we're talking to are in companies of 0 to 5, should be 1 to 5, apologies about that, 1 to 5 people. And then if I can just move on to the second poll, this is something that Fiona and Kathryn were interested in finding out as well, just to see if you are planning on having a break this summer, and if so, will it be in the UK or abroad? It's multiple choice, so you can obviously answer yes or no, and then in the UK and abroad. That'd be fantastic. I'll give people a couple more minutes, or a couple more seconds, sorry, don't want to go on too long. Okay, we'll end the poll there. And the results there showing, you know, a large percent of people are going to go on holiday at some point over summer, but obviously the majority is still planning to stay in the UK, which is interesting and hopefully good for the tourism sector in the UK. Great, so thank you everybody for taking the time to do that. So we'll now move on to the presentation. I want to start by asking Fiona about consumer confidence. I think there's been some really interesting reports and stats from the government around reopening and the consumer confidence. So what do you think are the most important findings from this? And we should have a...
Well, it's interesting because throughout the course of the pandemic, what Visit Britain has done is to try and poll people every week. And those statistics are detailed on a Friday, and they just tell you how people are feeling. And it became very clear really quite early in the piece that consumer confidence was going to be one of the big things that we had to overcome when we were returning to some sort of new normality. And I think this particular one that we've picked out really brings that into focus. I mean, fewer than a quarter of people believe that any sort of normality will return to the country within the current year. And if anything, that consumer confidence has been reducing week on week as more and more information starts to come out from the government about what the new normal looks like, and people are starting to go out into the streets and experience shopping. They're realizing that, you know, up to 50% of people feel very uncomfortable about returning to businesses that they used to use before the pandemic. So I think it's really important that we as business owners work very hard to ensure that our customers understand all of the steps that we're taking to make them feel safe. We're going to have to actually bring people out again and encourage them to come back to our businesses. And some of that has been because people have found a new way to shop or a new way to have their evening entertainment or whatever. But a lot of it is really around the sentiment that they are lacking confidence that business is going to do everything necessary to ensure that it's ready to receive customers. So, I mean, just in terms of all the government information, I think it's really important that all businesses know what's available to them and they fully read all of the information. So, I mean, the trouble is we're sort of overloaded with information, but each individual local authority has also got various things available to you, tick sheets, questionnaires, to ensure that you take as many steps as possible to have your business ready, not only to reopen, but to reopen with a ring of confidence around it. Many people have had to find during this time that they've had to find a new way of doing business. So there are certain things on offer, like Digital Boost, for example, where you can go and get help from volunteers who might help you to put together an app if you've never had to do one before for your business, if you have to put in place a booking system for whatever your business is offering. Visit England have introduced a new Good to Go kite mark, which is essentially a sort of accreditation system that businesses can sign up for. And we'll talk a bit more about that at the end. But essentially, it's really all about making sure that you give all of the information to both your customers and staff to make them feel really confident that when you reopen your business, you've put in place all the necessary measures to keep them as safe as possible.
That's really great. Thank you, Fiona. And Kathryn, did you have anything to add to this at all?
Yeah, just briefly, that like you have on the main points there, communication is key. As Fiona said, reassuring customers, but doing so in a way that's very, very clear. It's almost like you're going to have to re-educate people about how to interact. If your systems have changed, specifically the way that you may welcome customers physically as well as virtually, that's really important. And look for hints and tips. There are lots of associations out there, destination management organisations like ours, Inward Investment, chambers, local support, that have got lots of guidelines and help. So don't be afraid to have a look for best practice as well. And there was an interesting point somebody made on a story that on a call yesterday, that everybody has got so used when you're inviting to meetings to that being a digital meeting, they actually had someone turn up at their door. So again, it's actually being able to be clear and separating out now the virtual from the physical.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a good, interesting point. Okay, so moving on, Kathryn, I want to talk to you about how we can attract customers back, and there's been a lot of thinking going on to take place. How businesses can do that, how to plan or rethink in terms of volume sales as well, and what do you think are the main things businesses will have to consider here?
So first of all, we have here understanding who your customers are, because you might have to interact with them in a different way. One of the things that we found in working across destinations in trying to get that opening up message back is how you communicate with your customers. So we've been busy trying to find out which businesses are opening back up for the tourism and hospitality on the 4th of July, because not all of them will. And you look at people's websites, you try and call them, and you find that those websites haven't been updated. Yet what people have been doing is to use their social media channels to communicate, forgetting how time limited some of those tweets might be, and not having them as pinned tweets, or not having a bit more of a comprehensive information. So when it comes to communicating how you're opening up to physical customers or what your operations are going to be, it's essential that you don't just pick a quick channel. You've seen it. Make sure that you update all your channels effectively and cross-reference them wherever possible. And be clear about the adaptations that have been put into place. What's been really heartwarming is all the little videos that people have made. Some of them a little bit rough and ready on their phones, but sometimes those are the most endearing. Yeah. It shows that you've made a way to do it. Obviously, nice, slick, professional films that we've seen for particularly some of the larger visitor attractions across not just the UK, but internationally, have been very clear. But that's not with everyone's financial reach. But just a little clear explanation of when you come in, this is how things are going to change. And that's part of the personality of your business, and that's part of the DNA. And what we need to do is, while the access to your business may have changed, it's imperative that the customer experience is better than before. And you can only really do that if you're absolutely clear with what that is.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's really interesting. I have, like you, I've seen a lot of videos as well from businesses or attractions. And I have to say that the rough and ready ones are kind of a bit more my favorite. It makes you feel like, oh, I can do that too, or this is what they've been able to do, and they're happy to do that. So yeah, that's been a really interesting part for me. Fiona, just going back to you, there's been a lot of evidence, I think everybody would have seen, of businesses or experienced from firsthand of businesses pivoting or doing some sort of collaboration with other businesses. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think it will continue? And what do you think businesses can do to sort of maximise from the collaboration pivoting they've already done? And I think we've got some success stories here that you could talk to as well.
I do think it will continue, because what people are learning is that when there's a crisis like this, it's far better to work collaboratively and learn from others. So one example might be that if you're in the visitor business, places like the National Trust and the zoos opened ahead of you, and to be able to share the information that they're seeing. So for example, if you take the National Trust, they opened at the beginning of June, and they were able to deal initially with about 30% of the customers that they would normally experience. And they were finding that of those customers, about 90% of them were essentially members or people very connected who were coming out to show their support. And as time has passed, the number of people coming into those attractions has changed. Those who are sort of your members and people very connected to you have started to fall away. They feel like they've done their bit. And now they're starting to see more day trippers and people traveling slightly further afield. So I think the process of collaboration has always been there for small business, but it's actually never been more important than it is now. And I would echo some of the things that Kathryn was saying, use your local systems, your BID and your chambers of commerce, and take all the information that everyone else is sharing. So for example, on LinkedIn last week, various cities were showing how their visitor numbers had changed. So they took their high street and were able to show that in the first week of the shops opening, they were only getting 30% of the volume of people they'd previously enjoyed. By week 2, it had gone up to 50%. Now, if you have that data, it allows you as a business to plan better. If you know that most people are going to take some time to come round to you, then you can put in place staffing accordingly. And people are switching their opening hours to reflect that. Lots of people are very nervous about travelling at peak times. So again, you see switching of opening times from 10 to 4 as opposed to the old 9 to 5 model. So learning and collaborating with others, I think, is an ongoing situation that I hope we will continue to see. In terms of some success stories and people pivoting, I mean, we all have numbers of these, but just 2 to pick on. The Pub in the Park series, which is Tom Kerridge and Brand Events, that whole series was cancelled, and those were concerts that were going right across London, the southeast and the southwest. And they've come back, switching those concerts to essentially drive-in movies with a comedy store evening on a Friday night across a number of different locations. And they've done that really quickly, launched that and sold out virtually within the day. And that's another, I think, important thing. Consumers want to support those businesses that they previously had a connection with. So by just changing their offer and looking at a new way of doing things, they've essentially in some format rescued the summer business for themselves. The Antisocial Club is one that really appealed to me. That's a hotel in Cornwall that has moved its kitchen into the middle of its restaurant and created all little private dining rooms around it. And you book these dining rooms for essentially 2 hours. They can take up to 12 people. The kitchen in the middle is going to serve through hatches to each of the dining facilities. So it's just another way of doing things quickly. There's a pub in Oxfordshire that found itself at the start of the pandemic with loads and loads of pallets left from a big beer delivery. It's used all of those pallets to create outside eco-pods that will essentially double the size of the pub by putting them into the car park. The Mandrake Hotel in London is no longer offering a bar service when it's opened, but it's going to come round every room on the hour with a trolley service and a butler. There's there's a nightclub in Bristol. The nightclubs are going to be one of the last things to be allowed to open. So instead, they're going to do a pop-up in their car park. And they've invited along lots of food providers who don't have festivals to go to create this mini kind of nightclub out in the car park. So there are lots of examples. Spas are going to be one of the last things to open, and many hotels and short breaks are associated around spas. So someone like the Tudor Farmhouse in Gloucestershire has decided that as it can't open its swimming pool, it will give you a bicycle and a guide that will take you on a 20-minute cycle to a fresh open water swimming pool. And you will be able to swim in the lake as an alternative. And I just think that it's incumbent on all businesses to try and take some of those examples into your own business, and what can you do just to be able to deliver something that the customer wants and can see that you're making these efforts to pivot and change.
That's really interesting. Just a quick question for me, Fiona, on the one that's sort of natural swimming one where they're going to the lakes. What's the health and safety issues behind that? Because I assume if as a hotel you have your lifeguards or first aiders in there, but if you're then providing a reason for people to go to a lake and then there's an accident or something like that, has that been thought of? And again, with
absolutely. So that formed part of their risk assessment, and the butler is of course somebody who's a trained lifeguard and would be a person, if there was a problem, would be able to do that. They've chosen something within a very short distance of the hotel, so that if there is a problem, they are able to phone back very quickly for support systems. But by making it on a bicycle, it just forms part of a whole experience that the customer feels they're not missing out on something that they were going to that hotel for. They're just getting it in a slightly different way.
I think it's great. I like the Mandrake Hotel. Definitely will have a visit from me in the not too distant future. I think a butler instead of a bar is definitely an interest to me. I think for sure. That's really interesting. I think we've all seen some really good pivots in collaboration. Those examples are really interesting. I'm with you. I think these kind of things will continue for the foreseeable future and beyond, which is I think is really really positive. Just moving on to the next point I wanted to cover. Obviously, we talked earlier about attracting customers, but we also, as business owners, need to think about the needs of our staff as well, and what needs to be considered for them. And I just wanted to talk to both people, but starting with Kathryn on her thoughts on that.
One of the key challenges is people wanting to get back to work. I actually managed to get back into the Bristol office last Friday for the first time since mid-March, and it was lovely. It was really, really nice just to get back into the office. But not everybody feels like me. Some people are quite nervous about getting back in. One of the challenges is purely around transportation. The guidelines come out around public transport is being essential travel only. So again, about being flexible with people about how to travel, what happens if people want to travel by car, and encouraging people to walk or cycle if that's possible. And when it comes to walking and cycling, making sure you've got provision for those people coming into the office. So again, it's difficult because where you might have had people sat together, you might not be able to get everybody back in at one time, and so actually what the physical getting people back to work, the staff looks like, can be quite challenging. I think also around staff, moving people in, as I said, is a challenge, but also managing those staff who have children whose schools haven't gone back. That's something that I've been dealing with a lot, and how we manage that relationship. I'm running at a hybrid really, just for a short period of time, while as we keep talking about adjusting to the new normality, what that might look like.
Great. And Fiona, have anything to add on those points?
Yeah, I think there's some practical things that you can do to keep staff feeling that they're engaged. So, for example, making sure that you've got the same teams working at the same time, and setting up things like small WhatsApp groups so you can communicate with everybody rapidly. And when everyone comes back to work, just taking the time to ensure that they all understand what the new facilities look like, that they're walking through the process, that the whole risk assessment that you've gone through is shared with them, and everybody buys into what you're trying to do. Because it's very easy, I think, to create clipboards of things that are supposed to happen. But if it turns out to be a busy Saturday and everybody is, you know, full on with customers, reminding them to wash their hands every 30 minutes is not that simple. But just having situations where the phone pings with a reminder, or you're ensuring that one team leader takes responsibility for these things, just being seen to be a caring employer who's really thought quite carefully about making sure that everybody feels that they're part of the team.
Okay. That's good. I think we had a webinar a couple of 2-3 weeks ago now on sort of mental health awareness as well, and you know, people's mental health is going to be different, obviously, for each individual, but people are going to be able to deal with coming back into the office or the workplace in different ways too. I think it's really important for people that own business to keep an eye on that as well, and make sure there's regular check-ins in terms of that too.
Yeah, and for many people, work isn't just about work, it's about the whole social dynamic.
Yeah.
So whilst trying to ensure that everybody keeps apart, I think it's incumbent on all employers to keep that team dynamic going. And it can be something really simple, you know, just as an employer bothering to ensure that you've made water available in separate bottles for everybody as a simple thing, so that they don't have to go out or they don't have to use a facility that everybody else is using. Yeah. Just remind everyone to bring their own lunch, their own necessary equipment for the day. And those are just things that show that you've thought about their needs.
Great. Some really good points there. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. This is, I think you mentioned this earlier, Fiona. This is something which has come to light in the last week or two, I guess, or no, I've only been aware of it in the last week or two, sorry. But if you wanted to talk a bit about this, Fiona, what it means to companies and businesses.
Yeah, I think this is a really important kind of feature of getting back to some sort of confidence from the consumer. So if we go back to the beginning of this, it was very clear that a lot of people need to be coaxed back to shopping, coaxed back to businesses, etc. And we at Visit England hosted a number of seminars asking the industry right at the beginning of this how we could help by ensuring that when certain of the restrictions were lifted, businesses were ready and able to accept customers again. And the overwhelming ask was for some sort of accreditation system that would essentially provide almost a ring of confidence around businesses. And that's what We're Good to Go is all about. So it's essentially a toolkit that you can download from the website. It's self-accreditation, so you go on, whether you're a pub or a takeout or a B&B or whatever business you're offering, you go on, you upload your details, and you're essentially saying that you will adhere to all the government guidance and make sure that your business is both ready, adhering to all the risk assessments, has gone through all the health and hygiene processes, is looking after staff in the appropriate way. And when you're accredited, you then get all of the toolkit to put up on your windows. So we've already had 11,000 businesses sign up for this. We've only launched it 5 days ago. So in essence, more than 2,000 businesses a day are downloading this, putting it up into their window. And that in itself is telling people, telling customers that the business has gone through a process of making sure that it's ready. And we are finding a lot of people are liking that. So for example, one of the zoos at the outskirts of Bristol, it found that 85% of its customers, the big thing they were focusing on was, is the government guidance being adhered to, and is all the health and hygiene being adhered to? And when they see something like the green tick, that's a big consumer confidence boost. So it doesn't cost any money, it's self-accrediting, you can be spot checked obviously to ensure that you're doing it, but it's not a difficult process. And it's just something that's out there across the whole country. It's not just England. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have bought into this as well. And I suspect we will see over the course of the next few weeks more and more businesses putting that accreditation on their window and the customers feeling confidence from it.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's really, obviously I only learned about it in the last week or two, but I think it's a really important scheme to be involved in, and something that's really positive that's been produced. So really great to learn a bit more about that. On now to the next section, just for our attendees, just some really useful, actionable knowledge and some government advice and resources. When we get to talk about the resources towards the end, if you could all just bear with me until we get to the Q&A, I will copy the links that we're talking about into the chat room, and you can take them from there. But Fiona and Kathryn will be able to tell you what those resources are. Fiona, maybe or Kathryn, if I come to you first on any sort of these actionable knowledge and hints and tips.
Yeah, I mean, customer loyalty, if you've got databases of customers, if you're used to doing customer newsletters, your social channels, keep in touch, tell them what changes they are, don't overwhelm them with all the information at once. You can drip feed it, but again, being close to your customers is important, and to show what your distinction is. Anyone who's got a high street presence, that's an SME and an independent business, are going to be needed more than ever. What we'll see is big changes in the high street, the way people interact, and so keeping that local differentiation, it is absolutely critical. And in order to do that, you need your customers to come. And I think it's about being honest. There are some businesses that will not be able to open at the moment. They may not be opening until September. They might not be opening until April 2021. And certainly within the visitor economy, we're seeing a whole range of businesses that are going to be, some of which, as Fiona said, are already open, a lot of which will open on Saturday, but there are those who will not be able to open. And it's important to maintain visibility with your customers and your audience, and show them how they can work with you if there may not be a physical presence at this time. But also, as we've continued to talk about, is making sure the staff know, so that you can all communicate the same message at the same time. And here around marketing in your own business to help get through this difficult time, you know, and the situation is evolving all the time. So you may find your teams jumping from one thing to another, and it's just about reassuring them that where it may seem a little bit disjointed, that there is a strategy behind it, and that they just have to bear with us at this time, because nobody's been through this before. We've been through, we've certainly been through challenging times, but nothing like this.
I think also I would add that many people used to think that going to a big employer was the right thing to do, and they were much more attractive as an employer than, say, an SME. And that has completely changed in a situation like this, where it's very clear that some of the big companies will either no longer survive or will be going through a mass redundancy program. And I think that the smaller businesses can show that both they are flexible and have the ability to bring people with them in a different type of offer. And work is also about educating people. Now is the time to really put in place the training and look to the future as to what your business is going to be like. And you probably have a bit more time to be able to do that.
Great. Hello, I'm back, by the way. Sorry about that. It looks as though potentially there's some works going on my road, and it looks as though the whole street has been blacked out. And so I'm now joining via the 4G on my phone. So hopefully we're stable now. So of all things that go wrong, complete street blackout was not on my list of potentials. But did we go through did you talk through the resources and stuff like that, and or did you just fly straight to the Q&As?
No, we did talk a bit about the resources, but we also talked about the need to be flexible and change, and things that you don't imagine will happen to your business.
Okay.
And I suppose you're the key example of that.
Yeah. So I've just put in the links that you shared with me, Fiona, into the chat room, so they're there for everybody to click on and have a look at. We had a question that's come in from somebody that's anonymous, which is fine. It says, really interested to hear whether you are aware of the process in the event of a COVID case within a business. We've heard that possibly there will not be a need for teams to self-isolate if they have been wearing PPE. The concern is that without support, businesses may choose to avoid taking the necessary steps for financial fears. Do you have any thoughts or input on that at all?
Well, I certainly haven't seen that. I mean, as the information I've seen is that if you have a suspected COVID case, it's reportable into your local authority, and from then on your team bubble would have to isolate. But obviously up to the beginning of August, you can come in and out of furlough. So that started last week as well. So there is the capacity for you to use that system more flexibly. Whereas when it was announced at the beginning, it was just a standard system.
Okay. Have there any more questions that people have that are out there at all? Please do share them. What have we got here? Sorry, I'm just trying to look in the chat room.
Somebody's talking a bit about the SME sector.
Yes,
I mean, one of the things that we've been discussing is obviously there's quite a lot of talk around redundancy, particularly perhaps in the hospitality businesses, and what will be on offer if we end up with the sorts of figures that the press are discussing. And I think one of the things that's probably not well known is what is currently available in terms of apprenticeships. So for example, at the moment, you can take on an apprentice for training in a small business, and the government will pay the vast majority of that person's salary. One of the calls currently is that if we do end up with unemployment and we do have a lot of young people that need retraining, then potentially that apprenticeship levy should disappear altogether, and people should be encouraged and paid to take on young people and retrain them. And I would say that, again, the SME sector is very well positioned to do something like that. And I think when you operate a small business, it's very easy just to get your head down and not notice what's going on around you. But it's really important to lobby and to ensure that you join up all the networks and talk to the government through whichever source about things that would make a real difference in your industry. And one of the real changes during the pandemic is that there have been an awful lot of associations, hospitality and otherwise, National Outdoor Events Association, who've all got together and said, look, these are the things that the industry would really benefit from seeing changes. So whether that's reducing VAT, whether that's taking away the apprenticeship level, all these things that in turn would really support SMEs. So I would just encourage people to really be part of the bigger picture as well as running your own business, because SMEs make up the vast bulk of businesses in this country.
Okay, that's really interesting and important knowledge to share. We're going to let a couple more questions just stream in, but just before we get on to the final questions, I just wanted to reiterate something which I said at the beginning of the webinar before I was rudely interrupted by builders. And it's just that we are obviously really happy that there's lots of members on the call with us today, but obviously there's a lot of people out there who aren't our members, and we'd really like to for you to try out Tide and give us a go, and just to be part of the 190,000 UK customers. So on Monday next week, you'll receive an email from us with some more information about us and what we do and what we can offer you and your business. All you need to do is click through within the email, download the app, which you'll be able to do through the links that we share with you, complete the application, and then it should take, like I said, no more than between 5 and 10 minutes to get you your account number and sort code up and running. It won't cost you any money, and you can try it. It's totally risk-free. So if you want to do that, please do. And also feedback to us if there are features or within the app or things that you need as a business, please let us know, and we'll do our best to get those included in the app and welcome you with open arms as a new Tide member. So just going to a couple of other questions. Paul Elliott saying, what is to change to maximise hotel occupancy safely, and when could you foresee this happening?
I can take this one. In terms of hotels, I really felt for them, because the July the 4th date had been talked about for a long time, but they only got their last piece of guidance for opening last Friday morning. It's been a challenge. So I know from the hotels that I've been speaking to and continue to speak to and work with, their aim is to sort of taper up their business, if you like. So at the moment they are operating, a lot of them will be operated under reduced capacity. That's so that they can get their processes in place, particularly at the start when demand may not be as strong as they hope it will be later on. But it's just getting the process worked out, getting the staff in place, because obviously you can train and you can scenario plan, but until you've actually got operational customers in place, it's very difficult to know if these processes work. So there's some incredible innovations taking place around everything from check-in procedure to one-way systems around some of the larger hotels, but also for smaller properties, how they can reassure their customers. So that will come over time, and it will come over distancing, and I think it will improve as people get used to systems. But you know, there's a huge amount of expense that are going on to hotels now, particularly around cleansing and cleaning. But the priority for every property is making sure that their customers and staff are safe, and it means that they will be operating at reduced capacity to ensure this happens.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you. One from Pete Schoenbeck. I hope I got your surname pronounced right. What is the general feeling with the upcoming furloughing changes that will indeed affect the redundancy outlook as companies lay off furloughed staff?
I can pick up that one. I mean, there's some worrying signs already, I suppose. I mean, the problem with many of our businesses that are in the visitor-led economy is that they make their money in the summer that sees them through the winter. And so the more of that core trading time that disappears, the harder it is for them to be able to maintain their staff costs throughout the winter. So I suspect there will be two sets of data that will become apparent. The first set will probably be at the end of July, when there is a need from August onwards to pay at least a percentage of staff who are on furlough. So that will be the first point at which I think we will probably see whether people can hold on to the staff that they've got. And then the second one will come at the end of September, certainly in the tourism business, when they're looking ahead to probably 6 months with very limited income. And what the tourist industry is trying to do, and has been trying to do for some time, is really to extend the season and make sure that you know, it's not just all in those 3 key months. And it's been particularly unfortunate that we've had such a glorious spring, when normally the industry would have a really good start and bank some money that would see it all the way through. But we're hoping for a similar, you know, Indian September that will allow us just to keep going a little bit longer. We're lobbying the government hard for those October half-term holidays to potentially have another bank holiday included within them, because obviously consumer businesses have missed out on the 2 bank holidays in May, and just other things like that that will try and keep the business flow going as long as possible. Then on top of that, there's quite a big domestic marketing campaign coming, and we should all benefit from that. I don't know how many of you know, but the outbound tourism value of British going overseas last year was £79 billion. So that £79 billion is just people booking a holiday. It doesn't include all the money they spend when they get to Spain or wherever else. So all of that money could potentially be available to be within the UK and within our businesses and SMEs benefiting from it. So you'll start to see that campaign coming out over the rest of the summer, encouraging people to buy local, to visit local, to look after the businesses that have made it through this period of time. So I think the more we can get that message out, the better it is too.
Okay. And Kathryn?
Can I just pick up on a point there? And as Fiona says about SMEs, particularly within the retail and the food and drink sector, in the areas that I represent, they are the biggest beneficiaries of the visitor spend. So never underestimate, even if you're working in the food and drink sector, if you're working in the retail sector, never underestimate the value of a visitor, because there's a phenomenal amount of money that comes into those 2 areas over and above any other within the visitor economy.
Okay, that's a really interesting point. Jackie Jacob is asking, cash flow and working capital is going to is a major issue due to the current pandemic. Do you think banks will come to support of the SME sector?
I think that's a really interesting question. And one of the things that obviously has been going on with bounce back loans, with C-bills, there has been much more liquidity put into the marketplace that previously we haven't had. I mean, I read something, it's like 170 billion has been pulled down on this type of offer. The second thing that's clearly been seen is that some people are using that to pay off previous facilities that have been either more expensive or have had terms that perhaps, you know, for an SME weren't that good. So I would say that the banking system is starting to recognise the value of SMEs and making sure that they have a level of product on offer. But the main thing that's happened over this year has obviously been the government guarantee behind all of that work. And, you know, that has meant that a lot of businesses have been able to access cash at an interest rate that they previously would not have been able to get. The important thing for the banks, though, is that we're all after market share. So suddenly, lots of people are pulling down C-bills or bounce back who previously weren't really using those facilities. And those banks now have access to all that customer data, and it's incumbent on them to make sure that they make good use of it. You know, it's very expensive to take on new customers, and now suddenly, virtually overnight, banks have got a lot more SME customers that they're understanding what their business needs are. So yes, I would expect to see the banks step into that breach.
Especially Tide. A question from Mike Harris. It's a bit of a long one, but it's a good question. So, really fearful that there has been a lot of talk of business owners using common sense when planning their reopening. Whilst we're all adults, we have already seen scenes that are not acceptable where alcohol is involved. How do we as an industry ensure we don't have small numbers of businesses becoming the reason why we all end up having to close our doors again, and which undoubtedly may be the final act for a lot of small businesses?
I think this is where the We're Good to Go scheme comes in exceptionally. You know, it is a great scheme to do. You have to have followed your risk assessment. You have to go through the programme. I really take the point about the you know, not just business owners using common sense, but we're relying on the public to use common sense as well. I have to say that most of the business, you know, I say most of, that's awful, isn't it? All of the business owners that we've been working with take this very seriously, very responsibly. They've been, you know, they put their plans into place and then adapted them based on the guidelines that came out. And you know, some things were excluded, that like spas and leisure centres, leisure facilities within hotels that they anticipated they'd be able to use safely, couldn't. When it comes to particularly pubs and bars and high street pubs and bars, there's a lot of people who aren't opening this weekend because they're waiting to see how it goes. A number of businesses are waiting to open until Monday, so they can have a quieter run up and get their processes in place. But you know, there's nervousness with those business owners as well, because they don't want to be in a situation. They want people to come out and have a good time, but not in a situation where it causes problems on the high street. And I know, you know, that business improvement districts and the police are looking at this for the weekend. But you know, we've seen the pictures of Bournemouth Beach, and we've seen the rubbish that people leave behind. So it's not just, you know, business owners. I think that, you know, general public need to take some responsibility on this as well.
Yeah, for sure. And okay, we've got time for one last question. I think we've covered all the questions now. And the final one is from John Clegg. How do you propose to desensitize any given employee who is resenting returning to an office environment or work environment despite all social distancing, sanitization, sneeze screens, etc. being in place?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure how I would go about doing that. I mean, I think it comes back to the key thing of communication. You know, what is that employee feeling so nervous about? Is it that they all have to come in the same door? Or is it that where they hang up their coats is a very small area? Or is it that they perhaps have a member of their family who they're very worried about? I think the key thing is to understand what their issue is in the first place, and then to try and solve it. Most businesses are opening on a skeleton staff initially, so you might say to that person, would you prefer to be one of the later ones to start? If it becomes abundantly clear that there's nothing you can do to solve their problem, then it has to be that very difficult conversation of how is this going to go forward, really. But I think most people, if they have an issue coming back to work, they have a specific reason why. And if you have an open dialogue with that individual, usually you can solve that.
Great. And Kathryn, anything to add?
One of the interesting things that I've heard is where people are coming in, so half a team at a time. So, we talked earlier about having team bubbles so that you're not overwhelmed with people. And also, if you've got an individual who's particularly concerned, they're amongst people that they trust and can work with. But I echo what Fiona says, if there's any concerns that they have that you can't resolve, then it is time for that very difficult conversation.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we've covered all the questions there. It's been a really interesting webinar for many different reasons. But first of all, I want to say thank you to Fiona and Kathryn for taking the time. I know you're both extremely busy this week and have been for the past few months, and I really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your amazing insight and knowledge with us. It's been a really interesting webinar, and a personal thank you for keeping the conversation going when I blacked out. That was fantastic. It meant we kept a lot of people interested and on the call. Thank you to everybody that's managed to join. Please keep an eye out for future webinars that are happening weekly. A call again if you are interested in becoming a Tribe member. You will receive an email early next week from us, so please do follow the instructions on that email, and we look forward to welcoming you as a Tribe member. But again, thank you to Fiona and Kathryn for a really interesting webinar, and we look forward to seeing all the attendees here again soon. And yeah, thank you very much, guys, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.